The blood in her veins turned to ice when Violet Zimmerman heard the horses thundering behind her, their hoofbeats muffled by the thick blanket of snow covering the Sierra Nevada foothills in the winter of 1877. She dug her heels into her mare's flanks, urging the exhausted animal forward through drifts that rose past the horse's knees, but she could feel the strength draining from the creature beneath her with every labored stride. Behind her, 8 men gave chase, outlaws who had murdered her father in cold blood just 3 hours earlier at their mining camp near the California-Nevada border, and who now pursued her because she had witnessed everything. The wind howled through the pine trees, sending cascades of snow down from heavy laden branches. Violet's hands were numb inside her leather gloves, her face stinging from the relentless assault of frozen air. She had been traveling with her father to meet with investors in Virginia City when the gang had ambushed their small camp at dawn. Her father, Marcus Zimmerman, had been a geologist with claims to a promising silver deposit, and these men wanted those claim papers. When he refused to hand them over, their leader had shot him where he stood. Violet had run. She had grabbed her horse and fled into the wilderness while the men ransacked their belongings. But they had found her father's journal on his body, the one that mentioned his daughter carried copies of all the legal documents in her saddlebags. Now they wanted her dead, wanted those papers, wanted to erase every trace of her father's discovery so they could file their own claims. Her mare stumbled, nearly pitching Violet forward over her neck. The horse was done. They had been running for miles through impossible terrain, and the animal simply had nothing left to give. Violet's heart hammered in her chest as she looked back over her shoulder. Through the swirling snow, she could see dark shapes moving between the trees, spread out in a line to prevent her escape. 8 men, all armed, all determined. She urged her horse up a steep embankment, branches whipping at her face and catching at her heavy wool coat. The mare made it halfway up before her legs gave out completely. Violet barely managed to throw herself clear as the horse collapsed, flanks heaving, foam speckling her muzzle. The animal was finished. Violet grabbed her saddlebags and ran on foot, her boots sinking deep into the snow with every step. Her breath came in ragged gasps, forming clouds of vapor that the wind snatched away. She could hear shouting behind her now, the outlaws closing in. Her legs burned with exhaustion, her lungs ached from the frigid air, but terror drove her forward. She scrambled over a fallen log, pushed through a thicket of snow-covered brush, and emerged onto a narrow trail that wound along the side of a ridge. That was when she saw him. A lone rider sat motionless on a buckskin horse about 50 yards ahead, partially obscured by falling snow. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a long coat dark with moisture, and even from this distance, Violet could see the rifle resting across his saddle. For a moment, she froze, uncertain whether she had stumbled upon salvation or simply traded one danger for another. The rider must have heard the commotion behind her because he suddenly moved, dismounting with fluid grace and taking cover behind a large boulder beside the trail. His voice carried through the storm, deep and commanding. "Get down!" Violet dropped to her knees in the snow just as the first of her pursuers burst from the tree line. The crack of a rifle shot split the air, and the outlaw flew backward off his horse. Before his body hit the ground, the stranger fired again, and again, and again, and once more. 5 shots in rapid succession, each one finding its mark with devastating accuracy. The remaining 3 outlaws scattered, wheeling their horses around and disappearing back into the forest. Their shouts faded quickly, swallowed by the wind and distance. Violet stayed frozen where she had fallen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The sudden silence after so much chaos felt surreal, broken only by the whisper of falling snow and her own ragged breathing. The stranger emerged from behind the boulder, his rifle still at the ready as he scanned the tree line. After a long moment, he seemed satisfied that the danger had passed. He turned his attention to Violet, and she finally got a clear look at him. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features partially hidden beneath several days' worth of dark stubble. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-blue, sharp and assessing as they took in her disheveled appearance. There was something inherently capable about him, a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself that suggested a man accustomed to danger. "You hurt?" His voice was rough but not unkind. Violet shook her head, not trusting her voice. She tried to stand, but her legs refused to cooperate. The combination of exhaustion, cold, and sheer terror had drained every ounce of strength from her body. The stranger slung his rifle over his shoulder and approached, offering his gloved hand. "Easy now. You have been running hard." His grip was firm and steady as he helped her to her feet. Violet swayed, and his other hand came up to her elbow, stabilizing her. Up close, she could see the concern in his eyes despite his gruff demeanor. "Those men," she managed to say, her teeth chattering. "They killed my father. They wanted our mining claims. They will come back." "Not likely," he said, glancing back toward the forest. "Lost 5 of their own, and the rest were bleeding badly by the time they ran. Men like that do not have the stomach for a real fight when it costs them dear. They will be halfway to Carson City by nightfall, trying to forget this ever happened." Violet wanted to believe him, but fear still coiled tight in her chest. The stranger seemed to read her doubt because his expression softened slightly. "What is your name, Violet?" "Violet Zimmerman." "Quinn Kincaid," he said. "I have a camp about 2 miles from here, sheltered and warm. You need to get out of this storm before you freeze to death." Violet looked back the way she had come, thinking of her father's body lying in the snow at their ruined camp, thinking of all the plans they had made together, now turned to ash. Grief threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down. She could mourn later. Right now, she needed to survive. "My horse," she said weakly. "She collapsed back there. I saw. She gave you everything she had." Quinn walked over to his buckskin and gathered the reins. "You will ride with me." He swung up into the saddle with easy athleticism, then reached down for her. Violet hesitated only a moment before taking his hand and letting him pull her up behind him. She had little choice but to trust this stranger who had appeared out of the storm like some guardian spirit, and saved her life with 5 well-placed bullets. She wrapped her arms around his waist, holding tight as Quinn turned his horse along the trail. The animal was strong and sure-footed, picking its way carefully through the deep snow. Violet pressed her cheek against Quinn's broad back, grateful for the warmth that radiated through his coat. Her body shook uncontrollably now, whether from cold or shock she could not say. They rode in silence through the white wilderness. The storm showed no signs of abating, and Violet soon lost all sense of direction. The world had become nothing but endless snow and wind and the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. She closed her eyes and simply held on, trusting Quinn to get them wherever they were going. Eventually, she felt the horse turn and begin descending. When she opened her eyes, she saw they had entered a narrow canyon where the rock walls provided some shelter from the wind. At the base of one wall, partially hidden by an overhang, a canvas tent stood with smoke rising from a small stovepipe jutting through its roof. Quinn dismounted and helped Violet down. Her legs nearly buckled again, and he caught her easily, supporting her weight as he guided her toward the tent. "Get inside and warm up. I will tend to the horse." The tent's interior was blessedly warm, heated by a small iron stove in the center. Violet collapsed onto a bedroll spread along one side, her whole body trembling. She heard Quinn moving around outside, the sounds of him unsaddling his horse and securing the animal. Then he ducked through the tent flap, bringing a gust of cold air with him before quickly closing it behind him. He shrugged out of his wet coat and hung it on a peg driven into one of the support poles, then did the same with his hat. His dark hair was damp and unruly. He grabbed a tin cup and poured something from a pot sitting on top of the stove. "Coffee," he said, pressing the warm cup into her hands. "Drink it slowly." The coffee was strong and bitter, but it was hot, and that was all that mattered. Violet wrapped her frozen fingers around the cup and sipped carefully, feeling the liquid warmth spread through her chest. Quinn settled onto a crate across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. So she did. The words came slowly at first, then faster as the whole terrible story spilled out. She told him about her father's geological surveys, about the promising silver deposit they had discovered, about the journey to Virginia City to secure investors. She described the ambush at dawn, the cold brutality of the gang's leader as he shot her father, her desperate flight through the mountains. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the dirt and grime. Quinn listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she fell silent, he was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry about your father," he said finally. "No one deserves to die like that." "They took everything," Violet whispered. "His life, his dreams." "But they did not get the papers. I still have the claim documents in my saddlebags." Quinn's eyebrows rose slightly. "Those men died trying to take those from you. That must be some claim." "My father spent 3 years surveying these mountains," Violet said, a fierce pride cutting through her grief. "He knew these rocks better than anyone. The deposit he found is worth a fortune. He wanted to do it right, to file proper claims and bring in reputable investors. He said too many men got rich through violence and theft, and he wanted no part of that. Sounds like an honorable man. He was." Fresh tears threatened, but Violet blinked them back. "What are you doing out here alone in the middle of winter?" Quinn's jaw tightened slightly. "Trapping mostly." "Some prospecting. I have a cabin down near the Carson River, but I move around following game. You are a good shot." "I have had practice." There was something in his tone that suggested a story there, but Violet did not press. The man had saved her life. Whatever secrets he carried were his own business. The storm continued to rage outside, and as the afternoon wore on, it became clear they would be spending the night together in the tent. Quinn seemed unconcerned by this development, busying himself with practical matters like preparing food and checking their supplies. He produced a tin of beans and some hardtack, which he warmed on the stove and served in battered tin plates. They ate in companionable silence. Violet found herself stealing glances at her rescuer, studying the hard planes of his face, the way his hands moved with easy competence as he tended to their simple meal. There was something deeply attractive about his quiet capability, the sense that this was a man who could handle whatever life threw at him. When Quinn caught her looking, she quickly dropped her gaze to her plate, heat flooding her cheeks. But when she glanced up again, she saw the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Night fell early, as it did in winter, and the temperature plummeted. Quinn banked the fire in the stove and arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the tent. He gave Violet a wool blanket and took only his coat for himself. "You should sleep," he said. "You are safe here." Violet wanted to argue, wanted to say that she could not possibly sleep after everything that had happened. But exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she found herself lying down almost against her will. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Quinn sitting near the stove, his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. She woke sometime in the deep hours of night to find the tent dark, except for the faint glow of embers through the stove grate. Quinn was stretched out on his bedroll now, his breathing deep and even. Violet lay still, listening to the wind howl outside, and let herself cry silently for her father, for the future they would never share, for the sudden terrible loneliness that threatened to swallow her whole. Morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Violet woke to find Quinn already up, heating water for coffee. Frost coated the inside of the tent and her breath misted in the frigid air. "Storm passed," Quinn said when he saw her stirring. "We can travel today if you are up to it." "Where will we go?" "There is a town about 15 miles south of here. San Pedro, California. Small place, but it has a land office where you can file your father's claims. It also has a sheriff who should know about what happened to your father." Violet sat up, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "Will you take me there?" Quinn poured coffee into 2 cups and handed her one. "I will." "Why are you helping me?" He was quiet for a moment, his gray-blue eyes distant. "I was not always a trapper living alone in the mountains. 5 years ago I had a family, a wife and a little sister. We were traveling to California, looking for a fresh start. Outlaws attacked our wagon train in Nevada. By the time it was over, everyone I loved was dead, and I was the only one left to bury them." Violet's heart clenched. "Quinn, I am so sorry. I tell you this so you understand why I will not stand by when evil men prey on the innocent. I could not save my family, but I can help you. I will see you safely to San Pedro and make sure those claim papers get filed properly. It is what your father would want." The simple sincerity in his words brought fresh tears to Violet's eyes, but these were different from the ones she had shed in the night. These tears held gratitude and something else she could not quite name. They broke camp quickly and efficiently. Quinn packed his supplies onto his horse while Violet retrieved her saddlebags from where he had stored them. The leather pouches were battered and stained, but the documents inside were still intact, wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture. Her father's careful handwriting covered page after page, describing locations and geological formations, assay results and estimated yields. Looking at those familiar words and numbers, Violet felt her father's presence so strongly it hurt. "Ready?" Quinn asked gently. She nodded, tucking the saddlebag securely under her arm. Quinn helped her mount behind him, and they set out into the glittering winter landscape. The sun reflected blindingly off fresh snow, turning the world into a wonderland of white and gold. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. Today, it just felt cold. They rode steadily south, following trails that Quinn seemed to know by instinct. He pointed out landmarks occasionally, a distinctive rock formation here, a frozen waterfall there. He told her about the animals that lived in these mountains, the habits of deer and elk, the territorial nature of mountain lions. His voice was soothing, and Violet found herself relaxing against his back, listening to him talk about this harsh but magnificent wilderness he called home. They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat some of the dried venison Quinn carried in his pack. They had descended far enough that the snow was less deep here, and patches of bare ground showed through in places. A small stream burbled nearby, not yet completely frozen. "How long have you been living out here alone?" Violet asked as they sat on a fallen log, sharing the tough strips of meat. 3 years, give or take. After I buried my family, I could not face going back to civilization. Could not stand the noise and the crowds and people going about their normal lives while mine had ended. So I came up into the mountains and just kept going until I found a place remote enough that I could pretend the rest of the world did not exist. You ever get lonely? Quinn considered this. Sometimes, but mostly I am just angry. Angry at the world for taking them from me. Angry at myself for not being able to protect them. Angry at God for allowing such things to happen. He paused, then added more quietly, though I suppose yesterday I was in the right place at the right time to protect someone, so maybe that counts for something. Violet reached out and placed her hand over his. It counts for everything to me. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a connection forged in shared loss and the strange intimacy of survival. Quinn's hand turned beneath hers, his fingers curling to hold hers gently. They sat like that for a long moment, the winter sun warm on their faces despite the cold air, the sound of running water like quiet music. Finally, Quinn cleared his throat and stood, releasing her hand. We should keep moving. I want to reach San Pedro before dark. They traveled through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they descended from the high country. Pine forests gave way to scrubby oaks and grasslands brown with winter dormancy. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, buildings appeared in the distance. San Pedro, California was not much to look at, just a collection of wooden structures clustered along a single main street, with a scattering of houses and smaller buildings spreading out from the center. But to Violet, who had spent the last 2 days running for her life, it looked like paradise. Civilization. Safety. Witnesses. Quinn rode directly to the sheriff's office, a sturdy building near the center of town with a wooden sign hanging above the door. He dismounted and helped Violet down, then tied his horse to the hitching post outside. The sheriff was a grizzled man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Violet and Quinn took turns describing the events of the previous day. His expression grew progressively grimmer as the story unfolded. "I know the gang you are talking about," he said when they finished. "The Dawson brothers and their associates. They have been causing trouble from here to Nevada for the past year. We have wanted posters on 3 of them for robbery and murder." He looked at Quinn with new respect. "You say you took down 5. They did not give me much choice," Quinn said simply. "I will need to ride out there with some men, see if we can track down the bodies and the rest of the gang, but that will have to wait until morning." The sheriff turned his attention to Violet. "Miss Zimmerman, I am deeply sorry for your loss. We will do everything we can to bring your father's killers to justice." "Thank you, Sheriff," Violet said quietly. "But right now, I need to file his mining claims. He died protecting them. I owe it to him to see them properly registered." The sheriff nodded. "Land office is just down the street. Old Tim Morrison runs it. Tell him I sent you and he will take care of you." He hesitated, then added, "You will be needing a place to stay. The boarding house 2 blocks over is run by Mrs. Patterson. She is a good woman, and she will treat you right." Violet thanked him, and she and Quinn stepped back out into the cold evening air. The sky had turned deep purple in the east, with the last rays of sun painting orange and pink across the western clouds. Lamps were being lit in windows up and down the street, casting warm golden light onto the packed dirt road. They walked to the land office in silence. Quinn carried her saddlebags now, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. The land office was a small building with peeling paint and a crooked porch, but the man inside, Tim Morrison, proved to be exactly what the sheriff had promised. He was an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers who listened patiently as Violet explained about her father's death and the claims he had discovered. When she spread the documents out on his desk, his eyes widened. "These are exceptional," he said, studying her father's careful maps and surveys. "Your father knew what he was doing. This work is more thorough than anything I have seen from even the professional surveying companies." "He was meticulous about everything," Violet said, her voice thick with emotion. "Morrison worked efficiently, filling out the necessary paperwork, recording the claim boundaries in his ledgers, preparing copies that would be sent to the territorial offices. The whole process took over an hour, but when it was finished, Violet held official documents declaring her the legal owner of the Zimmerman mine and all mineral rights associated with it. "You are going to need help developing this claim," Morrison said as he handed her the papers. "Mining is not work for a woman alone, if you will pardon me saying so. You will need investors, mining engineers, workers." "I know," Violet said. "My father and I were on our way to meet with potential investors when we were attacked. I will write to them, explain what happened. They were honorable men. I believe they will still be interested in backing this venture." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Come see me if you need any advice or assistance. Your father did good work here. It would be a shame to see it come to nothing." Outside, full darkness had fallen. Quinn walked Violet to the boarding house, a tidy two-story building with a front porch adorned with hanging flower baskets, empty now in winter. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a plump, motherly woman who clucked sympathetically when she heard about Violet's ordeal, and immediately showed her to a clean, comfortable room on the second floor. "You just rest now, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, patting Violet's hand. "I will bring you up some hot soup and bread. You look like you have not eaten properly in days." When the landlady bustled away, Violet found herself alone with Quinn in the hallway. He handed her the saddlebags, and their fingers brushed as she took them. "Thank you," Violet said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "For everything. You saved my life, Quinn. I can never repay that." Quinn's expression was unreadable in the dim lamplight. "You do not owe me anything, Violet. I am just glad I was there when you needed help." "Will you leave now? Go back to your cabin on the Carson River?" He hesitated, and in that hesitation Violet saw the same uncertainty she felt. Something had grown between them over the past day and night, something neither of them had been looking for but which felt undeniable nonetheless. "I should," Quinn said finally. "You are safe here. The sheriff will handle things from here on out." "But you do not want to," Violet said softly. "It was not a question." "No," Quinn admitted. "I do not want to." They stood there in the narrow hallway, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Quinn took a half step back, as if physically forcing himself to maintain distance. "I will be at the saloon if you need anything," he said. "I will stay in town at least until the sheriff rides out tomorrow, make sure those outlaws are really gone for good." Violet nodded, not trusting her voice. Quinn tipped an imaginary hat to her, then turned and walked away. She watched him go, feeling something in her chest pull tight and painful. She had known this man for barely a day, but already the thought of him leaving felt unbearable. Mrs. Patterson returned with a tray laden with soup, bread, and hot tea. Violet ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. Her mind was full of gray-blue eyes and strong, capable hands, of a deep voice telling stories about mountain lions and frozen waterfalls, of the way it had felt to ride behind Quinn with her arms around his waist, feeling safer than she had any right to feel given the circumstances. She slept fitfully that night, her dreams full of gunshots and snow and her father's voice calling out to her. She woke repeatedly, disoriented in the unfamiliar room, her heart pounding. Each time, she forced herself to breathe slowly and remember, she was safe. The outlaws were gone. Quinn had saved her. Morning came eventually, gray and cold. Violet dressed in the same clothes she had been wearing for 3 days, grimacing at how dirty and wrinkled they were. Her first order of business would have to be acquiring new garments. Everything else she owned had been at the mining camp, which the outlaws had undoubtedly ransacked and destroyed. She went downstairs to find Mrs. Patterson serving breakfast to several boarders in the dining room. The landlady immediately ushered Violet to a seat and brought her coffee, eggs, and bacon. "You look like you could use a good meal," Mrs. Patterson said firmly, "and probably a hot bath. I will have my daughter heat water for you after breakfast." "You are very kind," Violet said gratefully. "Nonsense. It is just common decency. Now eat up." Violet was halfway through her meal when the door opened and Quinn walked in. Her heart did a ridiculous little jump at the sight of him. He had cleaned up somewhat, his face freshly shaved, his hair combed back. He looked younger without the stubble and even more handsome if that was possible. His eyes found hers immediately and a slow smile spread across his face. "Morning, Miss Zimmerman. I trust you slept well." "Well enough," Violet lied. "And you?" "The saloon has comfortable beds, though the man in the next room snored like a grizzly bear." Mrs. Patterson appeared, taking in the scene with shrewd eyes. "This the young man who rescued you, dear?" "Yes," Violet said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Mrs. Patterson, may I introduce Quinn Kincaid?" "Quinn, this is Mrs. Patterson, who runs this establishment." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Quinn said politely. "Sit down and have some breakfast, Mr. Kincaid," Mrs. Patterson commanded. "Any man who does what you did deserves a proper meal." Quinn obeyed, settling into the chair across from Violet. Mrs. Patterson brought him a heaping plate of food and more coffee. They ate together, making small talk about the weather and the town, but Violet could feel the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. After breakfast, Quinn walked with her down the main street. The town was coming to life around them, shopkeepers opening their doors, a wagon loaded with supplies rumbling past. It was all so normal, so ordinary, such a stark contrast to the violence and chaos of 2 days ago. "The sheriff is organizing a posse to ride out this morning," Quinn said. "He wants me to guide them to where the shooting happened. Will you go?" "Yes. They need to recover the bodies, and I am the only one who knows exactly where everything happened. Will you come back?" The words were out before Violet could stop them, revealing far more than she intended. Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. For a long moment he just looked at her, his expression serious. "Do you want me to come back?" "Yes," Violet said simply. "I do." Something shifted in Quinn's eyes, a wall coming down. "Then I will come back. I promise." The posse rode out an hour later, 6 men on horseback with the sheriff in the lead and Quinn guiding them. Violet stood on the porch of the boarding house and watched them go, her heart in her throat. She told herself she was being foolish. Quinn was more than capable of taking care of himself. He would be fine. Still, she could not shake the worry that gnawed at her. What if the remaining outlaws had not fled as far as Quinn believed? What if there was an ambush? What if something happened to him, and she never got the chance to understand these strange, powerful feelings that had taken root in her heart? The day dragged interminably. Violet bathed, luxuriating in the hot water Mrs. Patterson prepared for her, washing away days of grime and fear. She went to the general store and purchased new clothes, practical riding skirts and shirtwaists, a warm coat, sturdy boots. The shopkeeper's wife, hearing her story, insisted on giving her a discount and threw in extra undergarments and stockings at no charge. "We take care of our own here in San Pedro," the woman said firmly. Violet also purchased writing supplies and spent the afternoon in her room composing letters to her father's potential investors, explaining what had happened and her intention to move forward with developing the mine. Writing the words made it real, forced her to confront the fact that her father was truly gone, and she was now alone in the world. Except she did not feel entirely alone. Even though Quinn was miles away, she could still feel his presence somehow, like an invisible thread connecting them across the distance. Evening came, and still the posse had not returned. Violet paced her room, unable to settle. She tried to read a newspaper Mrs. Patterson had loaned her, but the words swam meaninglessly before her eyes. She kept going to the window, looking out at the darkening street, searching for riders. Night fell. Violet went downstairs for supper but barely touched her food. Mrs. Patterson, bless her, did not comment, just patted her hand understandingly. The other boarders talked amongst themselves, their conversation washing over Violet without making an impression. She was back in her room, standing at the window for probably the 100th time, when she finally saw them. 8 riders coming down the main street, moving slowly. Her heart leaped, and she counted quickly, relief flooding through her when she confirmed that all 6 posse members plus the sheriff and Quinn had returned safely. Violet grabbed her shawl and rushed downstairs, ignoring Mrs. Patterson's surprised exclamation. She hurried out into the cold night air and down the street toward where the posse was dismounting in front of the sheriff's office. Quinn saw her coming and moved to meet her, his face breaking into a tired smile. Without thinking, Violet ran the last few steps and threw her arms around him. He caught her easily, his arms coming up to hold her tight. "I was so worried," she said against his chest. "I am fine," Quinn murmured into her hair. "We all are, and the outlaws are gone, Violet. We found tracks showing they ran hard and fast northeast toward the border. They will not be coming back." Violet pulled back just enough to look up at his face. "My father, we brought him back. The sheriff will arrange for a proper burial tomorrow." Quinn's expression gentled. "He will be laid to rest in the town cemetery. I will be there with you if you want me to be." "I want you to be," Violet whispered. They stood there in the middle of the street, holding each other while the other men dealt with the horses and began dispersing to their homes. The sheriff approached, clearing his throat politely. "Miss Zimmerman, we recovered your father's belongings from the camp. What the outlaws did not take or destroy, at least. I have everything locked up at my office. You can collect it tomorrow." "Thank you, Sheriff, for everything." "We also found the bodies of the 5 men Mr. Kincaid shot. I sent descriptions by wire to surrounding towns. Turns out 3 of them had bounties on their heads. That money belongs to Mr. Kincaid by rights." Quinn looked uncomfortable with this information, but the sheriff pressed on. "It is a fair amount, Mr. Kincaid, close to $1,000 total. You earned it." "I did not shoot those men for money," Quinn said quietly. "Nevertheless, the money is yours. It will be waiting for you when you are ready to claim it." The sheriff tipped his hat to both of them and headed into his office. Violet and Quinn were left alone in the gathering darkness. She realized she was still holding onto his coat and reluctantly let go, taking a step back. "Will you walk with me?" she asked. They strolled through the quiet streets, not really going anywhere in particular, just wanting to be together. Violet told him about her day, about the clothes she had bought and the letters she had written. Quinn described what they had found at the mining camp, carefully editing out the worst details she suspected. Eventually, they found themselves at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead. They stood side by side, their breath misting in the frigid air. "I have been thinking," Quinn said slowly. "About what comes next for me." Violet's heart clenched. "Are you leaving?" "That depends." He turned to face her fully. "Violet, I know we have only known each other for 2 days. I know you are grieving your father and dealing with more than anyone should have to handle. But I need you to know that meeting you has changed something in me. For 3 years, I have been hiding in these mountains, running from life because I was too afraid to face it again. But yesterday, when I saw you being chased, when I had the chance to help someone instead of just existing alone with my anger and grief, something woke up inside me. And then getting to know you, seeing your strength and courage even in the worst circumstances, it made me realize that maybe I do not want to be alone anymore. Violet's breath caught. Quinn, I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give, he continued quickly. But I want to stay here in San Pedro. I want to be here for you while you figure out what to do with your father's mine. I want to help you if you will let me. And I want to see where this thing between us might go if you feel it too. I feel it, Violet said, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel it so strongly it frightens me. You are right, we barely know each other. But somehow I feel like I have known you forever. Like I was meant to find you out there in that storm. Quinn reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands. His palms were rough and warm against her cold cheeks. I am not an easy man, Violet. I have ghosts. I have anger I am still learning to let go of. I have lived rough for 3 years and I have forgotten some of what it means to be civilized. I do not care about any of that, Violet said fiercely. You saved my life. You have been nothing but kind and honorable. You have shown me more consideration in 2 days than some men show in a lifetime. Whatever ghosts you carry, we can face them together. Quinn's eyes searched hers, looking for certainty, for truth. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face and made her heart flip over. Together, he repeated, as if testing the word. I like the sound of that. Then he kissed her, soft and gentle and so achingly sweet that Violet felt tears spring to her eyes. His lips were warm despite the cold air, and the kiss tasted like new beginnings and second chances. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. My father would have liked you, Violet said softly. I wish I could have met him properly. He would have appreciated that you protected me, that you brought me safely here. That would have mattered more to him than anything else. She paused, then added, and I think he would be glad that I am not facing all of this alone. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand. At the front porch, Quinn kissed her once more, lingering this time before reluctantly letting her go. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow will be a hard day. Will you be at breakfast? I will be wherever you need me to be. Violet went inside feeling lighter than she had since before the attack. Yes, she had lost her father. Yes, she was facing an uncertain future, but she was not alone. She had found someone who understood loss, who knew what it meant to survive when everything you loved was taken from you. And somehow, impossibly, she had found the beginning of something that felt like hope. Her father's funeral was held the following afternoon in the small cemetery on a hillside overlooking San Pedro. The sky was overcast, threatening more snow, but it held off through the simple ceremony. The town's minister, a solemn man named Reverend Clark, spoke eloquently about loss and faith and the promise of eternal rest. Several townspeople attended despite having never met Marcus Zimmerman, drawn by compassion for his daughter and respect for the circumstances of his death. Quinn stood beside Violet throughout, his presence steady and solid as an oak tree. When her knees threatened to buckle, his hand found hers, fingers intertwining, lending her his strength. When the tears finally came, unstoppable and overwhelming, he produced a clean handkerchief and held her while she wept. After the service, people approached to offer condolences. Mrs. Patterson hugged her tight. The sheriff promised again that justice would be pursued. Tim Morrison from the land office spoke about her father's exceptional work and his certainty that the mine would be a great success. By the time the cemetery finally emptied, leaving just Violet and Quinn standing beside the fresh grave, the sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple. Violet stood looking down at the simple wooden marker the sheriff had arranged to be placed. "I do not know how to say goodbye to him," she whispered. "Maybe you do not have to," Quinn said gently. "Maybe he will always be with you in your memories in the work he did in the mine he discovered. Maybe that is enough." Violet thought about this, then nodded slowly. "He raised me to be strong, to face challenges head-on, to build something meaningful with my life. I can honor him by doing those things. He would be proud of you." They stood in silence for a while longer, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. Finally, Violet turned away from the grave, ready to face forward instead of back. Over the next weeks, life in San Pedro fell into a new rhythm. Violet received responses to her letters from two of her father's potential investors. Both men expressed shock and sympathy over Marcus Zimmerman's death, and both confirmed their continued interest in backing the mining operation. They proposed traveling to San Pedro in the spring to tour the site and finalize arrangements. Quinn rented a room at the boarding house, taking up residence down the hall from Violet. He spent his days helping around town, doing odd jobs, earning his keep. The sheriff hired him as a deputy, recognizing his skills and his calm competence in dangerous situations. Quinn also began teaching some of the local men to shoot better, conducting informal classes at the edge of town where targets could be safely set up. But mostly, he spent time with Violet. They took long walks together through the countryside surrounding San Pedro, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood, about growing up with a father who taught her to read geological surveys and identify mineral formations instead of teaching her embroidery and piano. He told her more about his life before the tragedy, about the small farm he and his wife had owned in Missouri, about his little sister's laugh and his wife's singing voice. They shared their grief and found it easier to bear together than alone. They shared their hopes for the future and discovered how well they aligned. And slowly, carefully, they fell deeper in love. Quinn courted her properly, respecting both her recent loss and her reputation. He brought her wildflowers he found in sheltered spots where spring was beginning to show despite winter's grip. He carved her a small wooden box to hold her father's papers. He read to her in the evenings from books borrowed from the town's small library, his deep voice making even dry historical texts sound interesting. Violet, for her part, discovered that allowing herself to be cared for did not make her weak. She had spent so much of her life being strong and independent, first because her father encouraged it and then because circumstances demanded it. But with Quinn, she could be vulnerable sometimes. She could admit when she was struggling. She could accept help without feeling like she was giving up some essential part of herself. She also began to understand what she wanted from life. The mine was important both as her father's legacy and as her own future security. But it was not everything. She wanted a home. She wanted a family. She wanted to build a life with someone who understood her, who challenged her, who made her laugh even on the hardest days. She wanted Quinn. Winter gradually loosened its grip on the mountains. Snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Trees began to bud. Birds returned from their southern migrations, filling the air with song. And on a mild afternoon in early March, Quinn asked Violet to take a ride with him. They rode double on a new horse Quinn had purchased, a strong bay gelding that handled their combined weight easily. He took her up into the foothills, following a narrow trail that wound between rock formations and scattered pines. Eventually, They reached a small valley sheltered on three sides by low ridges. A stream ran through the center, and cottonwood trees clustered along its banks. "What do you think?" Quinn asked as they dismounted. Violet looked around, taking in the beauty of the spot. "It is lovely. Why did you bring me here?" "I have been thinking about the future," Quinn said, his eyes intense on her face. "About what I want, where I want to be." "I am tired of living in a rented room, Violet. I am tired of feeling like I am just passing time instead of building a life. I want to put down roots again." "I want that too," Violet said softly. "This land is available, unclaimed. I could file a homestead claim, build a house here. It is close enough to San Pedro for convenience, but far enough out to have real privacy. And it is beautiful, peaceful." He paused, then added, "It would be a good place to raise a family someday." Violet's heart began to race. "Quinn, what are you saying?" He took her hands in his, holding them gently. "I am saying that I love you, Violet Zimmerman. I know it has only been 2 months since we met. I know you are still grieving your father. I know I am probably rushing this. But I have already lost one chance at happiness, and I do not want to waste time being cautious when I know what I want. I want you. I want us. I want to build a life together right here in this valley." Tears sprang to Violet's eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since you pulled me onto your horse and rode me through that storm. You saved me, Quinn, in more ways than just protecting me from those outlaws. You showed me that it was possible to survive grief, to find joy again even after terrible loss." Quinn pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes," Violet said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it." He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. The kiss spoke of futures to be built and vows to be spoken, and a lifetime of moments like this one, perfect and true. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Pedro. Mrs. Patterson insisted on organizing everything, recruiting half the women in town to help. They decorated the church with spring wildflowers and new green branches. They prepared a feast for the reception. They gave Violet a beautiful white dress that had belonged to Mrs. Patterson's daughter, altered to fit perfectly. Quinn bought a new suit and submitted to having his hair properly cut for the occasion. When Violet walked down the aisle toward him, his eyes went wide with wonder, as if he could not quite believe she was real and was choosing him. They spoke their vows in front of the gathered townspeople, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When Reverend Clark pronounced them husband and wife and Quinn kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception lasted late into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than Violet had seen in one place in years. The sheriff gave a toast praising Quinn's courage and Violet's resilience. Tim Morrison from the land office gave a toast wishing them prosperity and happiness. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears and hugged them both so hard Violet thought her ribs might crack. Finally, as the stars came out overhead, Quinn and Violet slipped away from the celebration. They rode back to their valley, to the small cabin Quinn had been working on for the past 3 weeks with help from several men in town. It was not fancy, just one large room with a fireplace and a bed and a table and chairs. But it was theirs. Quinn carried Violet over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. Inside, Mrs. Patterson had already been by to start a fire in the fireplace and leave supplies for breakfast. The cabin was warm and cozy, filled with golden firelight. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kincaid," Quinn said, setting Violet gently on her feet. "Mrs. Kincaid," Violet repeated, testing the name. "I like how that sounds." "So do I." They spent their wedding night learning each other in ways they had not allowed themselves before, discovering the joy of intimate connection and the profound rightness of being together. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath Quilt's misses. Patterson had given them as a wedding gift, watching shadows dance on the ceiling. "Are you happy?" Quinn asked quietly. "Happier than I have any right to be," Violet said. "After everything that happened, after losing my father, I thought I might never feel truly happy again. But I do." "You make me happy, Quinn. This life we are building makes me happy." "Good," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." Spring turned to summer, and the cabin in the valley became a true home. Quinn finished building a barn and a chicken coop. They acquired livestock, chickens and a milk cow, and eventually a few pigs. Violet planted a vegetable garden that thrived in the fertile soil near the stream. Together, they built a life that was simple but deeply satisfying. In May, the investors arrived from San Francisco and Nevada. Quinn accompanied Violet up to the mine site, which was still exactly as her father had mapped it. The investors were impressed by the quality of the claim and agreed to fund full-scale mining operations. They hired professional mining engineers to oversee the work and promised Violet a generous share of any profits. By late summer, the Zimmerman mine was in full operation with a crew of 20 men working the claim. True to her father's geological surveys, the silver deposit proved rich and extensive. Money began flowing back to Violet, more than she had ever imagined. But she and Quinn lived simply, saving most of it, investing it in land and livestock and the future. Violet discovered she was pregnant in the fall. She told Quinn one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. For a moment he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then joy broke across his face like sunrise. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Violet asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Quinn said, pulling her into his arms. "I thought I would never have a family again. After losing my first wife and my sister, I thought that part of life was over for me forever. But you have given me everything, Violet. Everything." Their son was born in May of 1878, a healthy baby boy with a full head of dark hair and his father's gray-blue eyes. They named him Marcus Quinn Kincaid, honoring Violet's father and marking the beginning of their new family legacy. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, patient and tender with the infant despite his inexperience. Violet would wake in the night to find him standing over the cradle, just watching their son sleep, an expression of wonder on his face. "I am so afraid something will happen to him," Quinn confessed one night. "After losing everyone before, I am terrified that this happiness cannot last." Violet understood that fear intimately. "We cannot live in fear of loss," she said gently. "We can only love as deeply as we can for as long as we are given. That is all anyone can do." Quinn nodded, though she could see the worry never fully left his eyes. But as Marcus grew, healthy and happy, some of that fear eased. The baby thrived, meeting every milestone, filling their home with gurgles and cries and eventually laughter. The mine continued to prosper. By the end of 1878, it was one of the most productive silver operations in California. Violet used some of the profits to commission a proper headstone for her father's grave, a beautiful marble marker that proclaimed his skills as a geologist and his integrity as a man. She and Quinn visited the cemetery regularly, sometimes bringing little Marcus to tell him stories about the grandfather he would never meet. In 1879, they bought more land, expanding their homestead to include several hundred acres of valley and foothill property. Quinn hired help to manage the livestock and build additional structures. What had started as a simple cabin grew into a proper ranch, with multiple buildings, fenced pastures, and thriving herds. Violet gave birth to their daughter in 1880, a beautiful little girl they named Sarah Grace. Unlike her brother, Sarah had her mother's coloring with auburn hair and hazel eyes. She was a serious baby, studying everything around her with intense concentration, and Quinn joked that she had inherited her grandfather's scientific mind. Life settled into comfortable rhythms. Quinn continued to work as a deputy sheriff when needed, his reputation as a straight-shooting lawman growing throughout the region. Violet managed both the household and her investments from the mine, proving as capable at business as her father had predicted she would be. Together, they raised their children with love and discipline, teaching them the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and the necessity of standing up for what was right. Marcus grew into a sturdy boy who loved horses and wanted to spend every waking moment in the barn with his father. Sarah became fascinated with rocks and minerals, collecting specimens and asking endless questions about geology. Watching his daughter's interest, Violet felt her father's presence strongly, as if his passion for the earth and its secrets had somehow been passed down through her to this grandchild he never met. The years passed, marked by seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. The mine eventually played out, as all mines eventually do, but by then Violet and Quinn had diversified their investments enough that they remained financially secure. They focused their energies on the ranch, which prospered under their careful management. In 1885, 7 years after their wedding, Violet stood on the porch of their home watching Quinn teach Marcus and Sarah to rope fence posts. Her son was 7 now, her daughter 5, both of them growing so fast it made her heart ache. Quinn's patience with them was infinite, correcting their technique gently, praising their efforts enthusiastically. As if sensing her gaze, Quinn looked up and smiled, that same smile that had captured her heart so many years ago during a snowstorm when 8 men had been chasing her, and a cowboy had saved her life. She smiled back, thinking about all the ways that terrible day had changed everything, how the worst moment of her life had somehow led directly to the best parts of it. She thought about her father often, about the man who had taught her to be strong and curious and brave. She wished desperately that he could have met Quinn, could have known his grandchildren, could have seen how his mining claim had provided security for his daughter and her family. But she took comfort in knowing he would have approved of the life she had built, the man she had married, the children she was raising. That evening, after the children were tucked into bed and the ranch had settled into quiet, Violet and Quinn sat together on the porch swing Quinn had built, watching the stars emerge overhead. The air was warm with the promise of summer, carrying the scent of hay and wildflowers. "Do you ever think about that day?" Violet asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time," Quinn admitted. "I think about how close I came to not being there, to taking a different trail that morning. I think about how easily things could have gone wrong, how I might have missed you entirely. But you did not miss me. You were exactly where you needed to be. We both were." Quinn pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "Everything I lost before, all that pain and grief, it led me to that moment when I could save you, and saving you saved me right back. You gave me a reason to come back to life, Violet. You gave me a future when I thought I did not have one." "We gave each other a future," Violet corrected gently. They sat in comfortable silence, swaying gently on the swing. Inside the house, they could hear one of the children stirring, probably Marcus having one of his vivid dreams. In a moment, one of them would go check on him, reassure him, tuck him back in. But for now, they simply sat together. Two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful from the ashes of loss. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Quinn's parents, whom he had not seen since before the attack that killed his first wife, eventually learned of his survival and new family. They traveled from Missouri to visit, and the reunion was emotional and healing. Violet watched her strong husband weep in his mother's arms, finally able to grieve properly for the family he had lost, surrounded by the family he had found. More children came. Another son in 1887, named Peter James. A second daughter in 1889, named Emma Louise. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Rooms added one at a time as needs arose and finances allowed. The sounds of children's laughter filled the valley, chasing away the last lingering shadows of past sorrows. Marcus grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet competence and steady demeanor. He proved to be a natural rancher, managing livestock with ease and showing excellent judgment about breeding and land management. Sarah's passion for geology never faded. When she was 16, she convinced her parents to let her travel to San Francisco to attend lectures at the new university there, one of the first young women to do so. She returned home with ambitious plans to become a professional geologist like her grandfather had been. Peter took after his mother's side, with a head for business and numbers. He helped Violet manage the family's various investments and showed a talent for negotiation that served them well. Emma was the artistic one, always drawing or painting, capturing the beauty of their valley in sketches and watercolors that decorated every wall of the house. Through it all, Quinn and Violet remained deeply in love. They had their disagreements, as all couples do, moments of frustration or misunderstanding. But they never forgot what they meant to each other, never took for granted the miracle of having found one another when both had needed saving. They made time for each other, long rides through the countryside they both loved, quiet evenings on the porch after the children were asleep, stolen kisses in the barn that made them feel like newlyweds even after years of marriage. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1898, their children, now ranging from young adults to teenagers, surprised them with an elaborate celebration. They had invited half the county, transforming the ranch into a festival ground with decorations and food and music. Mrs. Patterson, now quite elderly but still sharp as ever, attended as guest of honor, taking credit for having brought the couple together in the first place, which made everyone laugh. The sheriff, long since retired but still hale, gave another toast praising the couple he had first met during such tragic circumstances. Tim Morrison's son, who had taken over the land office after his father's death, presented Quinn and Violet with a framed map showing all the land they had accumulated over the years, a testament to their hard work and smart management. As the celebration wound down and guests began departing, Quinn pulled Violet aside, leading her away from the crowd to the small cemetery plot they had established on a hillside overlooking their property. Her father's remains had been moved here years earlier, so he could rest on land his discovery had made possible, surrounded by family. They stood hand in hand beside the marble headstone, watching the sun set in brilliant shades of gold and orange. "He would be proud of you," Quinn said quietly, the same words he had spoken so many years ago. "Of everything you have built, everything you have become." "We," Violet corrected, as she always did. "Everything we have built together." "Together," Quinn agreed, smiling. "That has always been our strength, has it not? Neither of us could have done this alone, but together we have created something extraordinary." Violet leaned into him, grateful for his solid warmth, for the life they had shared, for the love that had sustained them through 2 decades of challenges and changes. "I love you," she said simply. "Thank you for shooting those 5 men in the snow all those years ago. Thank you for bringing me home. Thank you for building this life with me." "Best 5 shots I ever fired," Quinn said, his voice rough with emotion, "because they led me to you." They stood there as darkness fell, 2 souls who had found each other in the wilderness and created a legacy that would endure for generations. Behind them, their children's laughter echoed across the valley. Ahead of them stretched whatever years remained, to be faced together as they had faced everything else. And as stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first night together as husband and wife, Violet knew with absolute certainty that 8 men chasing her through snow on that terrible winter day in 1877 had been the beginning of the greatest love story she could have ever imagined. Quinn had shot 5 of them, and the rest had never come back for her. But what had seemed like the worst day of her life had actually been the first day of her real life beginning. Sometimes, she thought, the universe works in mysterious ways. Sometimes, the path through darkness leads to the brightest light. And sometimes, when all seems lost, salvation appears in the form of a lone cowboy with a rifle and eyes like a winter sky, ready to fight for a stranger and then stay to love her for the rest of their days.